Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
I can hear you, the rest of the world hears you, and the people who knock these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda, and a terrorist who's responsible for the murder of thousands of innocent men, women, and children.
This is General Quarters. If you're a veteran and would like to share your story, email me. Email me at generalquarterspodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's generalquarterspodcast@gmail.com. I am honored to have Captain Tim Cooper with me today. Captain Cooper has had a remarkable career in the Navy and was the commanding officer of the USS Constitution. So we welcome you to the show, sir.
Good morning, Ken. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And as you mentioned to me when we were talking about putting this show together, right? I reached out to you. I wanted to really launch this thing with a bang. And, you mentioned to me that if we launched on the 29th of December, which is where we are today, that it was the 206th anniversary of the Constitution's victory over the HMS Java, right? And this makes it a perfect time to talk about this storied ship. But first, would you kind of walk us through a quick biography of yourself and how you became the captain of the USS Constitution?
Sure thing. So I joined the Navy in 1992, right after college. I went to the Massachusetts Maritime Academy in Buzzards Bay, Mass. And while I was a student there, I found myself in the middle of Desert Storm. I was one of, I think, about 20 cadets at that school that were sent off on commercial shipping assignments, and somehow we ended up in the middle of a war zone. Interestingly, to this discussion, the ship I was on was named the USNS Joshua Humphreys. And if you know who Joshua Humphreys is, he's the designer of the Constitution. My dad likes to give me some ribbing, saying everything kind of comes full circle.
Boy, it really does. Yeah, that's pretty neat. Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Wow. Yeah.
No designs on Constitution back then, but yeah, that was just an interesting aside. But I came in 1992, and I'm what we call a surface warfare officer. I serve on our surface ships. I've served on board destroyers, more modern frigates than Constitution. I did a tour in an aircraft carrier and a cruiser, and in 2009, I was selected to be the 71st captain of Old Ironsides, and what an honor that was.
Now, is that something, just so people understand how things work in the Navy, right? You do a tour, you kind of have a sea tour and a shoreside tour, usually back to back, and then as you're moving up to get command of a ship, I know nowadays you become first officer and then captain, but back in that time frame, how did it work where you got this selection? Was this something you actively solicited for, put in for? How did that go?
So it's changed. It has changed since my time on board Constitution. But the way it worked back then was after you completed your executive officer tour, your second command tour, and in my case it was on a Arleigh Burke class destroyer. Everyone who successfully completed those tours, their names are put up before a selection board, and the board decides out of all of those people who is going to move on to be the captain of a ship. And then they're just kind of rank ordered 1 through whatever the bottom number is. And that's the first step of the process. The second step of the process is the assignment to whatever platform you're going to. So in my case, you're given a wish list, a dream sheet that tells you what is available to you for you to then rank order. My preference would be this versus that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got my sheet, the things that were on there, besides Constitution, were things like Navy recruiting districts, Beachmaster units, or Riverine squadrons.
Here we go.
Mobile security squadrons, that sort of stuff. And I had to, and I had to rank order all those. And lucky for me, I got my number one choice.
That's pretty wild. So it just seems interesting to me that you were the XO of an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, and you wind up on the USS Constitution. I mean, the dichotomy in that is incredible. Number one, probably the most modern, highly technical warship in existence in any fleet anywhere. Coincidentally, my cousin Greg was the plank owner on the Arleigh Burke,
no kidding.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. And he finished out his tour in Groton not that long ago. But that's pretty neat. And so, it seems like you said nowadays they go from XO to CO of the ship that they're serving on. And when you were selected as the captain of the Constitution, was that something that not only I can imagine that's very honored, and of course what a storied ship, but the other piece of it, Captain, to me, which must have been pretty cool for you, is that you're a Massachusetts guy, you're a Boston guy, grew up in Marshfield. So I mean, not only were you coming home, but you were coming home to take command of probably the most well-known ship in the fleet.
Yeah, that was actually part of the decision-making process as I was putting my list together.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time, I'd been living I was in Virginia at that point, California before then. I'd be remiss, or I'd be telling a falsehood if I didn't say that, being able to go home
mm-hmm.
and serve and have command of that ship didn't all kind of play into the equation together. It was absolutely fabulous.
Yeah. And so 2009 is when you took, when exactly in 2009 did you come aboard?
July 24th was the change of command date.
Oh yeah.
And then July 22nd in 2011, I had to be drug off that ship, kicking to give it to the next guy.
Well, it's funny because I just missed you, and as we were talking off mics, it looks like we have met at least once, but at another retirement. But I retired off the USS Constitution in May 2009, so I just missed you at that point, and that would have been a kick because we've gotten to know each other a little bit through correspondence through another podcast and network, which is kind of neat, and of course I'm a Boston guy, grew up loving history. I don't know how many times as a kid, I've toured that ship and have always had a love for the Navy, and knew from a very young age that I was going to be in the Navy, and I had 25 great years between active and reserve time, so it was a wonderful time. But there was nothing more appropriate for me than to retire off that ship. So I love how it started off with you on the Joshua Humphreys, and how it came full circle. Here you are home on a storied vessel like this, and that's incredible. I mean, even inside, I feel the jitters for it, because for me, if history had gone in a different direction and I wasn't colorblind, it could have been a SWO. That probably would have been a goal of mine too one day. So it just it's great to talk to somebody to see who has gone through that, and and it sounds like, Jeepers, we could have a whole podcast on the rest of your career with all the different types of vessels that you served. I mean, frigates, destroyers, aircraft carriers. That's a very diverse assignment list you have for being out to sea. So that's incredible.
I'm happy to talk about any of them. They were all my favorite ship at the time I was there.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, well, definitely. Maybe we'll. Have you watched the Last Ship at all? That series?
I did. I watched the first season, and
Mm-hmm.
I had to. There were several points in that where having come from an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, I was
sure.
Oh, that's not right.
Of course.
I get it. It's trying to make do some Hollywood magic, make it interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
I found it compelling until it was the CO became the CNO or whatever it was, and that's when I kind of lost interest in it.
I followed it through, but I thought the first season was fun. But like you, we all know, no matter what we watch, that if it involves Hollywood and the military, they never get it complete. However, I thought it was a good ambassador for the Navy overall. They do show some pretty good capabilities of what that ship can do in certain aspects, and then there were other things you're just going, well, maybe not so much, but it was fun, and I thought it had that right mix of crew and characters. Of course they all want to hit the diversity and inclusion piece of it, and I think the show did that pretty well. But see, we go on tangents, right? That's what happens. We start talking about other things. Yeah. So let's get back to the ship itself. Now, I imagine, so you went to Mass Maritime. So you must have, grown up. You grew up in a seaside town south of Boston. Your love for the sea must have been etched in you from the very beginning, like just part of your DNA.
Not even a little.
Not even a little, yeah.
No, it's kind of it's an interesting story how I ended up at Mass Maritime. When I was in high school, I like to think I was smart. Maybe my teachers might disagree, but I think I was smart.
Okay.
I was lazy, and I wasn't the best student because of my laziness. So I was kind of just marking time through high school. And when I started getting towards my, into my junior year and started my senior year, my father was starting to put some pressure on me, like, hey, you need to figure out what you're going to do. If you want to go to college, go right ahead, or you're going to get a job, but you're not going to come home and sit on the couch and stare at the TV all day long. Mm-hmm. And this was becoming like an everyday thing with him, and I love my father, and he really, put the pressure on me when I needed to have it put on me. But anyway, at the time I was getting tired of this, why every time I see my father, it's this interaction of, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to do with your life? Get your hair cut, mm-hmm. Get thrown in there once in a while. And one day at school, I ran into a friend of mine who was coming out of the guidance counselor's office. I think it's guidance counselor, wherever you go and, they tell you about college fairs and stuff like that. He was coming out of there and said, "How you doing? Hi, what you doing?" He said, "Yeah, I was just getting information about an open house at Mass Maritime this weekend." And didn't resonate with me at the point. I was like, "Oh, great, whatever." And I went in and did whatever I had to do. When I got home that night, or my father got home that night, rather, he came in and I start getting the business again. Where are you going to college? And this time I had an answer for him. I want to go to Mass Maritime. And he was out of the blue. He didn't know what, he kind of looked at me like, really? You got an answer this time? This is, I don't know how to respond to this. And honestly, I think, it was like early in the week, Monday or Tuesday or something. And I think if he could have thrown me in the car and parked me at that gate of that school waiting for the open house that weekend, he would have, to make sure I didn't change my mind. But we went down there that weekend and I was looking around and I'd always been kind of interested in or fascinated by the military and what it meant. Mass Maritime's run on a military model. But as we were going through our tours, meeting the current cadets that were there and some of the faculty and stuff, they were talking about the disciplinary structure and the lifestyle at the school. And this is what I consider this led me to my first grown-up decision in life, at least what I consider that to be, was that, if I am going to use my parents' money to put myself through college, I'm going to need help doing it. I'm not going to, otherwise I would have been the kid who went to a school and just kind of existed there and partied maybe too much mm-hmm. and didn't go to class. I needed that extra layer on top of me to help me be successful. And that's how I chose Mass Maritime. It was there that I discovered that not only am I getting this help I need, that I actually like what I'm studying. Mm-hmm. Driving ships is fun. And learning about all those things that make that possible, I was having a lot of fun with. And I kind of threw myself into it. And it's all because of a random interaction with a friend of mine from high school, and my father.
Oh, sure. It is funny. It is funny how these things creep up on you, and life changes on a dime.